When we reflect on the Gospels and Acts, we see that Jesus transformed a group of ordinary people into world-changing missionary disciples. As we carefully observe what Jesus did during his time with his disciples, we see him take them through a deliberate process of development to train them to do the sorts of things that he did. Because this process took place over time, we will need to refer to a number of different scriptures, in this example through the Gospel of Matthew. The development process started with the call of the disciples in Matthew chapter 4, verse 19. Jesus said, "Come follow me, and I will send you out to fish for people." And in the following verses, we see the emphasis on the first half of that phrase. Jesus is very directive, and the disciples are basically just following him around, watching what he is doing. Jesus is preaching in synagogues, casting out demons and healing people. They are probably very enthusiastic, but can't yet do what Jesus can do. In the next stage, Jesus knows that the disciples need to discover that they can't do what they are called to do. He also knows that they need to get through the loss of enthusiasm and confidence that goes with that discovery. One of the most dramatic places we see this is in Matthew chapter 8 from verse 23. They are following Jesus to the other side of the lake and beginning to help by using their skills in sailing a boat. A furious storm comes down, and these fishermen who knew how to handle boats discover that they are in a situation that is beyond their capabilities. They wake Jesus, who was deliberately asleep, and call on him to do something. When Jesus stills the storm, they discover the importance of turning to Jesus in these sorts of situations. Jesus coaches them about the importance of faith and dealing with their fears. When people experience the discouragement of these sort of situations, they can give up and go and follow someone or something new to get another hit of initial enthusiasm. Fortunately for us, the disciples don't do this. They persist through the discouragement and start to develop confidence and competence. A few chapters later in Matthew 10, Jesus sends them out to preach and heal. Then in Matthew chapter 14, from verse 13, we see another stage in their development as Jesus changes to a more consultative approach. 5,000 people had been with them and had grown hungry. The disciples suggest sending the crowd to surrounding villages, but Jesus challenges them to feed the crowd. They can only find 5 loaves and 2 fish, so Jesus helps. The disciples organize the crowd, Jesus prays over the food, and the disciples distribute it. 5,000 people are fed with lots of leftovers. In the broad sweep of the story of the Gospels, the disciples still have much more to learn and experience, particularly about the events of Easter, but then they reach the next stage of their development. In Matthew chapter 28 from verse 18 to 20, just before Jesus' ascension, Jesus delegates to them the task of making disciples from all nations. Just as he had multiplied his life into them, he now sends them out to multiply their lives into others. With a bit of reflection, we can probably identify how parents go through these stages in raising children from babies to being responsible adults, or how they are used when a person is teaching someone to drive, or with a plumber training an apprentice. You may have experienced examples of this in your own life. I use these stages in helping to develop someone to lead Discovery Bible studies with non-Christians. I invited them to be part of a small group that involved a group of Christians and non-Christians. Because the Discovery Bible study format was different to other sorts of small groups they had been in, I initially ran the group and directed everything that we were doing. Over time, I asked them to lead various parts of the gatherings, but I was still there managing everything. Then, when on some occasions when I was absent, I asked them to run the whole gathering. We would consult beforehand about what to do, and then we would debrief afterwards about how it went. I found it very satisfying when we reached the final stage and they left the group and they started their own Discovery Bible study group with a non-Christian neighbour. Now, to help us remember this development process, there is a simple shape, and it is the square. Each side of the square corresponds to different stages in the development of others. In stage 1, the D1 follower is enthusiastic but low in competence, and the L1 leader is directive. It's the I do, you watch stage. In stage 2, the D2 follower recognises their low competence and loses enthusiasm. The L2 leader needs to come alongside as a coach, pointing the follower to God's vision and God's grace. This is the I do, you help stage. In stage 3, the D3 follower is beginning to develop confidence and competence, and the L3 leader needs to shift to a more consultative approach. This is the you do, I help stage. And in stage 4, the D4 follower is competent and confident, and the L4 leader needs to delegate responsibility to the follower. This is the you do, I watch stage. Now, firstly, it's important to recognise that this isn't about one person being the leader and controlling everything. Rather, it is about the person with expertise multiplying their expertise into the life of another person so they can be released to go and do it for themselves. That might mean, for example, in a relationship between two people, the first person might have expertise in leading worship and is multiplying their expertise into the second person, while at the same time the second person who has expertise in hearing God is multiplying their expertise into the first person. Secondly, the square is all about situational leadership. It is designed to help leaders be aware of what is going on and to choose the appropriate leadership style. Now, all of us will have our own preferred leadership styles that we will default to, and the square can help us be more holistic in our leadership. Some of us will tend to direct and delegate and not use the coach and consult styles. Others of us will tend to coach and consult and not direct or delegate. Being aware of our own biases and being more deliberate in our use of leadership styles will make us more effective. Thirdly, the movement of a follower from D1 to D2 is important. It is actually a necessary part of the multiplication process, but often when people encounter the discouragement of D2, they will quit whatever it is they are learning about and go and find a new thing. This can be seen in churches where a new program is launched with great enthusiasm and has some initial success, and then problems or difficulties emerge, and so they give up and go and find a new program to launch. Leaders need to be on the lookout for D2 moments and respond with accessibility, vision, and grace. In these D2 moments, and in fact all the way through the journey around the square, it is vital to process these Kairos moments around the learning circle. If we follow the leadership square process and keep these points in mind, we will have the joy of seeing others being raised up and released into the things that God has called them to do.